I still remember the exact moment I knew. It was a chilly Tuesday evening in our quiet North Carolina suburb, the kind of night where darkness settles early and porch lights blink on one by one. I was sitting in my truck in the driveway, engine ticking as it cooled. Through the living room window, I saw my wife Lauren on the couch, her face lit by the glow of her phone. She didn't notice I was home. She was too absorbed, smiling at whatever was on that screen. Something in that smile stopped me cold. It wasn't the casual, distracted grin of someone scrolling through recipes or news. It was intimate, a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. After 8 years of marriage, I could read Lauren's expressions like a map. That slight bite of her lip, the way her eyes sparkled, those were looks she usually saved for private moments between us. Or so I thought. Now they were out in the open for her phone. My gut tightened, an old familiar sensation from my army days, the one I'd get on patrol when something was off, but I couldn't yet spot the threat, a sixth sense telling me to stay alert. I quietly shut the truck door and approached the house with practiced stealth. Inside, I heard her faint laughter through the front window. My heart pounded against my ribs in a slow, heavy thud. I paused with my hand on the doorknob, racing through rationalizations. Maybe it's just a funny video. Maybe she's texting her sister. But deep down, I already knew something was terribly wrong. When I entered, Lauren jumped, nearly dropping her phone. The startled look on her face might as well have been a confession. She scrambled to compose herself, flashing me a too bright smile. "Jake, you scared me!" she exclaimed, locking her phone and setting it face down on the coffee table as if by reflex. I forced a chuckle and an apology. "Sorry, didn't mean to sneak up on you." My voice was calm, steady in a way that surprised even me. Inside, a storm was brewing, but on the surface I slipped into the composed demeanor I'd learned as a captain leading a unit overseas. Never let them see you sweat. We exchanged the usual small talk about our days. I mentioned a late meeting at work that had kept me out, a lie. I'd left on time but parked down the street for half an hour, needing to clear my head before coming inside. She mumbled something about a headache and an early night, but I noticed a half-empty glass of wine on the table, and her makeup slightly more done up than a quiet night at home warranted. Each detail pricked at me. I nodded along as she spoke, cataloging the clues like a reconnaissance report. That night, I lay in bed next to Lauren, staring at the ceiling long after her breathing slowed into the heavy rhythm of sleep. My mind replayed the scene in the living room over and over. Her secretive smile, the way she'd nearly dropped her phone, the unmistakable guilty flush on her cheeks. Lauren had always been somewhat protective of her phone, but I'd chalked it up to a desire for privacy. Now I wasn't so sure. Trust, but verify, we used to say in the service. It was time to verify. The next morning, I left for work early, or at least I pretended to. Instead, I parked 2 blocks away under the shade of an old oak. If she was hiding something, or someone, I intended to find out. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, oddly familiar and almost comforting. It was the same mix of nerves and focus I'd felt on secret missions abroad. Only this mission was deeply personal. Sure enough, at 9:30 a.m., well after I'd normally be gone, I saw our garage door open from my down-the-street vantage point. Lauren's car backed out. She was supposed to be at work by 9. She hadn't mentioned any plans to go in late. My pulse quickened. I watched as she drove off in the opposite direction of her office. Jaw clenched, I decided to follow. Keeping several cars behind, I tailed her across town, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles blanched. She led me on a 20-minute drive to a part of the city we rarely visit. Finally, her car pulled into a small public park off a quiet side street. I cruised past and slipped into a spot behind a line of hedges, unseen. From there, I watched. Lauren parked beside a silver sedan I recognized from the couple of times I'd picked her up at her office, Brian's car. My stomach lurched. Brian Mitchell was a project manager at her company, someone she'd casually mentioned a handful of times over the past year. I'd met him briefly at a holiday party, a tall guy with an easy laugh and a firm handshake. Nothing about him had set off alarm bells then, aside from perhaps a too friendly smile toward my wife. I'd shrugged it off. I wasn't the jealous type. But now, seeing his car here, on a random weekday morning, miles from their office, my throat went dry. Lauren stepped out of her car, smoothed her blouse, and walked quickly toward a secluded walking trail at the edge of the park. Moments later, Brian emerged from his sedan, glancing around before following her. He had a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, as if that made him incognito. My vision narrowed, a red haze creeping in at the edges, as I watched my wife meet another man in broad daylight. Right here in our community, where anyone could see. It was brazen, and that brazen comfort with deception cut me deeper than anything. They disappeared together down the winding trail, into a grove of bare oaks. I wasn't about to let them get away that easily. Heart hammering, I killed my engine and slipped out of my truck. Keeping my distance, I skirted along a parallel path, moving tree to tree. Winter leaves crunched underfoot, so I took each step slowly, carefully, staying downwind like I was on a hunt. About 50 yards in, I spotted them between the trees. They probably thought the emptiness of the park and the cover of branches gave them privacy. From behind a broad trunk, I watched Brian reach out and touch Lauren's arm, then her lower back. He pulled her in. She tilted her face up to him, and then they were kissing, deeply, unmistakably. My hands shook. I raised my phone as proof and snapped a photo, then another. The world seemed to go silent except for the camera's shutter click. Time slowed. There I was, crouched in the cold like a damn paparazzo, photographing my wife in another man's embrace. A wave of nausea hit, and I had to steady myself against the tree trunk. There it is, I thought. Proof. Proof of the unthinkable, Lauren, the woman who had sworn fidelity to me, who had cried at our wedding and promised to love me forever, was entangled with someone else. I felt something inside me tear, a mix of heartbreak and pure, incandescent rage. In that moment, I wanted to burst from my hiding spot, to confront them in a fury of betrayed anger. A younger version of me might have, but the soldier in me, the part trained to calculate and strategize under fire, held me back. I could almost hear my old drill sergeant's voice growling in my head. "Stay cool, Captain. Stick to the mission." And I had a new mission now, whether I wanted it or not. I forced myself to take a step back, both literally and figuratively. Observe, record, do not engage. That mantra had kept me alive through combat patrols, and it would guide me here. I took a few more photos, zooming in to catch their faces clearly. Each image felt like a dagger twisting in my chest, but I swallowed the pain, channeling it into focus. Eventually, they broke apart and spoke a while, their voices too low for me to catch. Lauren was smiling that intimate smile again. They looked comfortable, even happy. Brian stroked her hair, then took her hand and led her further down the trail, out of sight. They were probably headed to some even more private spot, or maybe to his car or a motel. I'd seen enough. More than enough. Hands trembling, I retreated to my truck. Once inside, with the doors locked, I finally let out a sound, a guttural roar of anguish and fury that I buried into my sleeve so no one would hear. My eyes stung, but I refused to let tears fall. Not yet. There was work to do first. I drove off before they could notice me, adrenaline making everything sharp-edged and surreal. My mind was already shifting from despair to planning. Lauren and Brian had no idea I knew. That ignorance was my one advantage, and I intended to use it. As I pulled away from that park of betrayals, a chilling calm settled over me. I will not be a victim, I promised myself. If they wanted a war beneath the facade of our perfect suburban life, I would give them one, and I'd make sure I was the one left standing. I spent the next several days moving through life in a controlled daze, equal parts heartbroken and hyper-focused. By sheer force of will, I acted normal around Lauren, all while noting every irregularity in her routine. Each morning I got up, brewed coffee, kissed her cheek, and saw her off to work with a tight smile. It felt mechanical, but I couldn't afford to let my guard down. Not yet. That very afternoon after catching them, I began gathering evidence in earnest. While Lauren showered before dinner, I seized the moment to search her phone. It wasn't easy. At some point in the past few months, she'd changed her passcode. That alone was telling. We'd always known each other's phone passwords as a gesture of trust. Now she had one I didn't know. My hands shook as I tried a few guesses. Her birthday, our anniversary. No luck. Finally, I recalled the 4-digit code she used for her gym locker, the same as our street address. The phone unlocked, and a sickening feeling churned in my gut as I swiped through her apps. She'd been careful, I'll give her that. There were no obvious texts from Brian in her messages, no telling emails in her main account. But people always slip up. I found what I was looking for in her Photos app, a hidden album behind one of those innocuous little vault apps. Inside was a trove of pictures that made my blood boil. There was Lauren, hair tousled and lips swollen, lying on rumpled sheets that weren't ours. A hotel, I guessed. Another of her perched on an office desk, Brian's desk, presumably, skirt hiked up and a playful, sultry look on her face. Dozens of photos and selfies, each more damning than the last, and the accompanying text captions left no doubt. "Miss you already," read one. "Counting down the hours until I can feel you again," read another, attached to a photo of her in what I recognized as the new lingerie set I'd never actually seen her wear for me. By the time I heard the water shut off, I'd seen enough. My hands were ice cold, despite the hot anger pumping through me. I forwarded everything to a secure email account only I had access to, then carefully closed her hidden album and set the phone back where I found it on the nightstand. Slipping out of the bedroom, I headed to the kitchen and tried to steady my breathing. When she emerged moments later, wrapped in a towel and oblivious, I was at the stove sautéing vegetables, as if nothing were amiss. If she noticed the sweat on my brow or the tightness in my voice, she didn't mention it. That evening was one of the hardest tests of my life. Sitting across from Lauren at dinner, watching her lie effortlessly about another ordinary day at the office, I had to grip my fork hard to keep from flinging it across the room. I nodded in the right places, and even forced a small smile as she prattled on about some TV show she wanted to watch. Inside, I was raging. Vivid flashes of those photos kept searing through my mind. Lauren in that lacy red lingerie, posing for him. Lauren tangled in hotel sheets with a man who wasn't me. I chewed and swallowed food I couldn't taste, and with every bite repeated to myself, discipline, patience. Endure this now, and I'd have my time later. That night, I couldn't bear to share our bed. I feigned a headache and took a pillow to the couch. In the dark living room, I finally let the tears come. Hot, silent tears of betrayal that I wiped away roughly the moment I felt them on my cheeks. I was too angry to cry for long. Anger was good. Anger would keep me sharp. Over the next week, I transformed into a one-man intelligence unit. I bought a small GPS tracker and, under cover of darkness, attached it to the underside of Lauren's car. From an app on my phone, I monitored her movements in real time. It was almost boring how predictable their meetups became. Long lunch, gym sessions on Tuesdays that showed her car parked behind Brian's downtown condo. Extended grocery runs on Thursday evenings when her dot on the map lingered at a motel off the highway. Each time I logged the location, date, and duration in a black notebook I'd once used during deployments to record mission details. Page after page, I documented her deceit in cold, clinical detail. I dug into our finances as well. Late one night, while Lauren slept in our bedroom, truly slept, as I could tell by her soft snores, the one sound that still hit me in the heart, I opened our laptop and combed through bank statements. It didn't take long to find anomalies. There were ATM cash withdrawals on days I knew I hadn't made any. A few $100s here, 1,000 there. Likely Lauren siphoning off spending money for her secret life. On our credit card, I spotted charges for boutique hotels and expensive restaurants in parts of the city we rarely visited together. She hadn't even bothered to get a separate card for her affair. That's how certain she was I'd never notice. Or maybe she just didn't care anymore. Each discovery was another dagger of hurt, but also another weapon for my growing arsenal. By week's end, I had compiled a damning portfolio: photographs, screenshots of flirty messages and emails, location logs from the tracker, credit card statements highlighting every dollar she spent on her affair. I backed up every piece of evidence securely, unwilling to risk losing any of it. Throughout this process, I considered confronting Brian directly more than once. One afternoon, I even drove to the office park where he and Lauren worked. I spotted him coming out to his car, smug and carefree in his tailored suit, and my hands actually ached to pick a fight. But a street brawl in a parking lot wasn't going to solve anything. If anything, it might tip him off or even land me in jail. No. I needed to stay cool and stick to the plan. Instead of fists, I sought counsel. Under the pretext of meeting a friend, I set up an appointment with a divorce attorney that a buddy of mine, a fellow veteran, had recommended. Her name was Marjorie King, and she had a reputation for being a shark. Sitting across from her in a downtown law office, I laid out the broad strokes of my situation. It felt surreal to hear the words, "my wife's affair," in my own voice. Marjorie listened intently, then asked, "Do you have proof of the infidelity?" In response, I slid the thick folder of printouts and photos across her desk. She flipped through it, eyebrows arching slightly at a few of the more graphic pieces of evidence. "You've been busy, Mr. Hunter," she murmured. "I'm nothing if not thorough," I replied with a mirthless smile. She nodded. "Good. This will serve you well." Over the next hour, Marjorie schooled me in the cold realities of what lay ahead. North Carolina, she explained, still allows fault-based divorce considerations and even civil suits against a spouse's lover. My ears perked up at that. "Wait, I can sue Brian? Hold him legally responsible for breaking up my marriage?" I asked, incredulous. She gave a thin smile. "Alienation of affection. It's a long shot and can be messy, but yes, it's still on the books here. Some juries hand out hefty sums if you can prove the third party knowingly interfered in your marriage. The idea of dragging Brian into court and squeezing him dry was tempting. A vision flashed of him squirming on a witness stand as all his dirty laundry got aired. Still, Marjorie cautioned me such cases are expensive and unpredictable. I filed it away as an option, a tool I might use if it promised to hurt him. She outlined how a divorce citing Lauren's adultery would give me the upper hand. Lauren would likely be denied alimony, and my evidence could secure me the lion's share of assets. When she asked what outcome I wanted, I didn't mince words. I wanted both my wife and her lover to pay dearly for what they'd done. Marjorie gave a sharp nod and agreed to strategize accordingly. Walking out of that firm, I felt a grim sense of solidarity knowing I had the law, at least partially, on my side. I also carried an acute awareness that I needed to be very smart about my next moves. If I tipped my hand too soon, Lauren might lawyer up or try to hide assets. If I waited too long, I risked losing the fire that was driving me. It was a delicate balance, but one I was trained for. Marjorie's parting advice rang in my ears. Keep it quiet and gather more evidence until you're ready to strike. That's exactly what I intended to do. Before I did anything drastic, I made a few more practical maneuvers. Over the next few days, I opened a new bank account in my name only and discreetly moved a portion of our joint savings into it. I also changed the direct deposit for my paycheck to that account. I left just enough in the joint account that the change might go unnoticed for a while. If a financial war was on the horizon, I wanted the high ground. 2 weeks crawled by after I first caught them. 2 weeks of feigning ignorance, of letting Lauren kiss me goodbye in the morning and ask with forced casualness how my day was at night. 2 weeks of sleeping on the couch more often than not, because I just couldn't stomach lying beside her unless absolutely necessary. By the end of it, I was strung out from the tension, but I had everything in place. The evidence, the legal strategy, the secured assets. It was all ready. The time had come to confront my wife and set the final act of my plan into motion. It was a late Sunday afternoon, sunlight bleeding orange through the blinds, when I decided to pull the trigger. I found Lauren in the garage, sorting through boxes of old junk to donate, a burst of random house cleaning that reeked of guilt. I stood watching her for a moment, steeling myself. This was it. I cleared my throat. Need any help? She jumped slightly, then smiled. Oh, hey, hun. Sure, if you want to go through this one. She pointed to a box of my old army gear and mementos. I knelt and lifted an old framed photo off the top of the pile. It was us, years ago. I was in uniform, just home from a deployment, and she was wearing my army cap, grinning, perched on my lap in our kitchen. We looked so happy. I felt a lump in my throat as I stared at the frozen smiles of younger, more innocent versions of ourselves. We were happy then, weren't we? I said quietly, still looking at the photo. Lauren paused, then came to my side. Of course we were. We still are, right? She sounded unsure, noticing the strange tone in my voice. I set the photo aside carefully and met her eyes. My own must have been wet, because I saw her expression change to concern. In a trembling voice, I said, I feel like something's wrong with us, Lauren. Her face fell. What do you mean? She actually looked panicked. Nothing's wrong. We've both been busy, sure, but we're okay. I swallowed the bitter taste in my mouth. I mean, I know about you and Brian. There. I'd said it. The grenade was on the table. Lauren went very still. The color drained from her face so fast I almost reached out, thinking she might faint. What are you talking about? She breathed, attempting a laugh that didn't come off at all. That's That's crazy, Jake. I just stared at her, silent. She searched my face, her eyes darting, and realized I wasn't bluffing. A spasm of fear crossed her features. Jake, no, you've got it wrong. Stop, I cut her off, my voice sharper than I intended. I took a breath, trying to rein in the anger bubbling up. I saw you, Lauren. I know everything. The long lunches, the errands that took hours, the motel. I practically spat the last word. Lauren's hand flew to her mouth. Tears sprang into her eyes. Oh my God, she whispered from behind her fingers. And then the dam broke. I'm so sorry, she sobbed, shoulders collapsing inward. I'm so sorry, Jake. There it was, the confession. Hearing it, I expected to feel some satisfaction, but all I felt was a hollow ache. My chest hurt as if someone had driven a railroad spike through it. I turned away, blinking back my own tears. How long? I managed to ask, my voice rough. She hesitated, then whimpered. About 6 months. 6 months. I closed my eyes, fury flaring. Half a year of lies. Half a year of her coming home to me, sleeping next to me, acting like everything was normal. I never wanted to hurt you, Lauren cried, stepping toward me. It just happened. I was weak and stupid. I shook my head, a sharp jerk. You made a choice, I said, voice low and quivering. Every day you carried on with him. You chose this. She broke down, covering her face with both hands as sobs racked her. You have every right to hate me. I hate myself. I cut her off again, unable to stand the self-pity in her tone. Why? I demanded. Why did you do it? What did I do to make you? My voice caught, and I hated myself for sounding like I was begging for an explanation. But I needed to hear something. Lauren dropped her hands, revealing a face soaked in tears and running mascara. It wasn't you. It was never you, she choked out. I never stopped loving you. I was stupid and selfish and scared. She sobbed that she still loved me and had only strayed because I had grown distant after the army. It was the same tired excuse, an attempt to shift blame onto me, and hearing it sparked my anger anew. I pulled my hand away, fighting the urge to storm off right then, but I knew I needed to see this through to the end. I turned away from her, rubbing a hand over my face. I can't just pretend everything's okay, I said, voice strained. How the hell am I supposed to trust you now? She stepped closer, daring to reach for my arm. Maybe in time, she stammered. I'll do anything, Jake, anything. I'll go to therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. I'll quit my job. I'll never speak to him again. Please. Please don't throw us away. Please. The audacity of her asking me not to throw us away made something snap inside, but I kept my cool externally. Instead of shouting, I let out a long, weary sigh. I looked at the woman before me, the woman I'd loved so deeply, now desperate and broken, and I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. This was exactly where I wanted her, scared of losing me, willing to do whatever I asked. I slowly nodded, as if conflicted. I don't know, Lauren, I murmured. I need time. This hurts so much. My voice cracked convincingly. A real tear slid down my face, and I didn't bother hiding it. Lauren latched onto that tiny glimmer of hope. Take all the time you need, she pleaded. I'll wait. I'll prove myself to you, I swear. Just, please, let me try to fix this. A heavy silence fell. Finally, I gave a small nod. All right, I'm not making any promises, but I won't make any rash decisions, not yet. Before I'd even finished the sentence, she threw herself at me. wrapping her arms tightly around my neck. I stood stiffly for a moment, then allowed my arms to encircle her lightly. She cried into my shoulder with relief. "Thank you," she kept whispering. "Thank you." I stared over her shoulder, my eyes cold and focused on nothing. She had no idea that I wasn't forgiving her at all. I was simply repositioning my pieces on the board. The truth was, I'd already made my decision. Our marriage was over, but I needed her to believe otherwise a little longer. So I stroked her hair and murmured, "We'll see," while mentally finalizing the destruction of her world. Thus began a surreal new chapter of my life, pretending to rebuild a marriage I had every intention of tearing apart. In the days following our confrontation, Lauren transformed into the model repentant wife. She hovered around me anxiously, desperate to please. I woke up each morning to find her already up, brewing my favorite coffee and frying eggs just the way I liked. In the evenings, she would sit close to me on the couch, resting her head on my shoulder while we watched TV. Initially, I recoiled from her touch, but I forced myself to allow these displays of affection. I even put my arm around her or held her hand at times, as if trying to find our way back to normal. On the surface, it might have looked like tentative reconciliation. Inside, I felt nothing but a mix of bitterness and resolve. We attended marriage counseling as part of our rebuilding charade. There, Lauren tearfully admitted her wrongdoing while I spoke of my hurt in measured tones. I appeared calm and forgiving, when in truth, I was simply detached, treating each session as another performance. In truth, those counseling meetings were less about healing for me and more about reinforcing Lauren's belief that I was trying. She eagerly took it as a positive sign each time I agreed to attend. The therapist likely thought I was remarkably composed given the circumstances. Little did she know that my composure came from the cold clarity of knowing exactly what I planned to do. At home, I maintained the facade of a husband cautiously working on forgiveness. I let Lauren think we were slowly reconciling. Sometimes I'd even initiate small gestures, holding her hand during an evening walk or telling her, "We'll get through this," in a convincing tone when she broke down apologizing for the 100th time. Each such moment filled her with visible relief. It also served to make her guard drop. She believed I truly wanted to save our marriage, and that belief made her malleable. To prove her commitment to our fresh start, Lauren took a drastic step about 2 weeks into our false reconciliation. She quit her job. One evening, she came home and announced it nervously, as if unsure how I'd react. "I resigned today," she blurted out while we were cleaning up dinner. I feigned surprise. "Resigned? Why would you do that?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I thought it's what you'd want, so I wouldn't have to see him at work, so you wouldn't have to worry." She twisted her dish towel anxiously. "I can find another job later or do freelance. We'll be okay financially. I need you to know I'm serious about making things right." I walked over and gently took the towel from her hands. Inwardly, I was almost gleeful. She'd just cut off her own income and isolated herself further. But I kept my face solemn. "That's a big step," I said quietly. "Thank you for doing that. It means a lot." She burst into relieved tears and fell into my arms. I stroked her back and murmured soothing words even as I thought about how much easier the divorce would be now that she was unemployed and dependent on me. I suspected that Brian might not let go easily. Indeed, over the next week he attempted to contact Lauren with pleading, love-sick messages. To her credit, she showed them to me and assured me she told him it was over. It was almost pitiable how desperate he sounded, and it only steeled my resolve that neither of them should escape consequences. I also reached out to Brian's wife, Melissa, and shared with her the proof of their affair. She had her suspicions, but was crushed to learn the full extent of his betrayal. Though devastated, she thanked me for telling her and vowed to divorce him. We quietly agreed to coordinate our actions against them moving forward. Through all of this, I kept up my act with an almost sadistic determination. Lauren truly believed I was inching toward forgiving her. She clung to that hope like a lifeline. Meanwhile, I was quietly preparing the grand finale of my revenge. I had the evidence. I had the legal strategy. Now I wanted maximum impact. After much thought, I settled on turning an upcoming social event into the scene of their ruin. Every year in early December, one of our neighbors throws a big holiday party, inviting dozens of people from our community. Friends, co-workers, neighbors, even some local family. Lauren and I had attended every year, and this time the Mitchells, Brian and Melissa, were expected to be there too. It would be the perfect stage. Over a couple of sessions, I worked out logistics with my attorney, Marjorie. I would file for divorce on grounds of adultery, and simultaneously file the alienation of affection suit against Brian. We timed it so both sets of papers would be ready to serve on the evening of the party. Marjorie arranged for an independent process server to handle the serving. I gave her the party address and the approximate time when I knew both targets would be present. By early December, everything was locked and loaded. Lauren remained none the wiser. If anything, she seemed nervously excited that we were venturing out to a social gathering as a couple again, a sign to her that maybe we were turning a corner. I let her believe that. In quiet moments, a part of me almost felt pity for what was about to happen. But then I'd remember catching her wrapped around Brian in that park, or picture the look on Melissa's face when I told her the truth. My sympathy would evaporate, replaced by a cold, righteous anger. They deserve every bit of what's coming, I told myself. And I truly believed that. The stage was set. That December evening, we headed to our friend's big holiday party as if nothing was amiss. Lauren dressed elegantly and was visibly anxious, but I reassured her with a warm smile and a hand on her back. We stepped into the Jennings' bustling home just after 7 p.m., blending in with the festive crowd. The house was bright with Christmas lights and filled with the cheerful noise of dozens of guests. I greeted acquaintances with firm handshakes and a faint smile, Lauren at my side. Anyone observing us would have seen a normal, even affectionate couple. Only I knew that under my polite veneer, I was coiled tight as a spring. Across the living room, I spotted Brian almost immediately. He was pouring punch into a cup, chatting with another neighbor. Melissa stood beside him, holding their infant, her face polite but unsmiling. She caught my eye briefly and gave a subtle nod. I inclined my head in return. We both knew what was coming. Lauren noticed them too. Her grip on my arm tightened when Brian's laugh rang out over the music. "Let's go to the kitchen," she whispered, avoiding looking in their direction. I obliged, steering her away. I could feel the tension in her body. This was her first time seeing him in person since she'd broken it off. If only she knew it would also be the last time they'd appear in public without disgrace. We mingled casually for a while. I made small talk with neighbors about holiday plans and the weather, all the while keeping an eye on the clock and on Brian's movements. He mostly stayed near the food table, looking a bit uneasy. Good, I thought. He should be. At around 8 p.m., I excused us from a conversation and guided Lauren toward the large living room by the entryway. My heart was pounding now. I scanned the front windows. Right on cue, I saw a man in a suit approach the front door, a leather briefcase in hand. The process server. Moments later, our host, Tom Jennings, walked into the foyer with the suited man, looking puzzled. The man cleared his throat and addressed the room in a loud, professional voice that cut through the music and chatter. "Excuse me. I apologize for the interruption. I'm looking for a Mrs. Lauren Hunter and a Mr. Brian Mitchell." An instant hush fell. I felt Lauren go rigid beside me. Her eyes went wide as saucers. Across the room, Brian nearly choked on his drink. He glanced around in alarm. Melissa was stone-faced. Tom, the host, raised an eyebrow, but dutifully pointed us out. That's Lauren right there, and Brian's over by the tree. Is something wrong?" The server, ignoring the host's question, stepped forward toward me and Lauren. "Mrs. Hunter?" he asked crisply. Lauren's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He extended a sheaf of papers toward her. "These are for you." Lauren's shaking hands rose automatically to take the packet. She stared at the top page, her face draining of all color as understanding hit. I could practically pinpoint the exact second her heart broke. Then the server turned and crossed to where Brian stood. Brian backed up a step, almost tripping over the edge of the rug. The server held out an identical packet. "Mr. Mitchell, these are for you, sir." Brian snatched the documents, brow furrowed. He glanced down, confusion turning quickly to rage as he scanned the heading. I knew exactly what he was reading. Hunter versus Mitchell, civil complaint for alienation of affection. For a long, pregnant moment, nobody in the room moved or spoke. It was as if time had frozen with everyone mid-breath, eyes darting between Lauren, Brian, and the unknown man who had just served them. The server gave a polite nod to Tom, murmured, "Thank you, that's all," and saw himself out, shutting the door quietly behind him. Lauren made a strangled noise. "Divorce?" she croaked, her eyes still glued to the petition in her hands. By now, guests were whispering furiously. All eyes were on us. I gently stepped away from Lauren, who looked like she might collapse. With a deep breath, I raised my hands slightly in an almost apologetic gesture and spoke up, projecting my voice so everyone could hear. "I'm sorry to drop this on everyone tonight, but I've just served my wife with divorce papers." There were gasps and a few cries of, "Oh my God," from the circle of onlookers. I continued, feeling an eerie calm as adrenaline steadied my nerves. "I discovered over a month ago that she's been having an affair with Brian." A collective shock rippled through the crowd. I saw a mix of horror and fascination on the faces around us. Lauren stared at me in abject mortification, tears spilling freely down her cheeks now. Brian looked ready to combust. Shocked voices rose all around us, an angry buzz of disbelief and condemnation. Lauren sobbed openly now, face in her hands. She couldn't even muster a reply. I pressed on coldly, seizing the momentum. "It's real," I said, voice hard. "For 6 months they lied to all of us, to me, to Melissa, to everyone. And now there are consequences. I'm divorcing Lauren for adultery. And as you can see," I nodded toward the documents in Brian's hand, "I'm also suing Brian for the role he played in destroying my marriage." Brian's face had gone from red to white. He looked at Melissa, who stood a few feet away clutching their baby. She met his gaze with fire in her eyes. Then, to my surprise, Melissa stepped forward. Her voice rang out, clear and furious. "And I'll be divorcing him." She pointed an accusatory finger at Brian. "He wrecked our family, and I won't have it." Her voice cracked at the end, and a friend moved to support her, taking the baby from her arms. Brian, panicking, finally found his voice. "This is a private matter," he barked, trying to muster some authority. We should discuss this elsewhere." He stepped toward Melissa as if to grab her arm and flee, but she wrenched away from him. "Private? she repeated, her tone incredulous and dripping with disgust. You think anything about this is private now? She gestured at the crowd, at the papers in his hand. You cheated on me for months and lied to everyone. You don't get to hide from this, Brian. Brian's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He looked utterly lost. Meanwhile, Lauren had sunk onto the sofa, sobbing uncontrollably into her hands. A couple of close friends of hers hovered nearby, not sure whether to console her or scorn her. Most did nothing. I scanned the faces around us, neighbors and friends who had welcomed us into their homes, shared holidays with us, who thought we were a happy couple. Now they knew the truth. I felt a grim satisfaction as I watched the mixture of pity and judgment in their expressions. I let the silence stretch a few seconds more, then delivered the final blow. For those who are curious, I said, raising my voice again, the evidence is all there. I nodded toward the documents Lauren had let slip to the floor. They were spilling out for anyone to see. A photograph of Lauren and Brian kissing in the park sat atop the stack like an exhibit. People's eyes followed and widened at the sight of it. I gave them both a chance to do the right thing quietly. I lied smoothly. But they chose to keep sneaking around. So, here we are. It wasn't true. I hadn't confronted Brian at all before this moment. But I didn't care. Let them both bear the full weight of people's contempt. Lauren looked up at me then, her face a ruin of mascara and misery. Jake, please, she croaked, reaching a hand out toward me, pleading even now for mercy. I stepped back, out of her reach. The only emotion I felt seeing her like that was a dark, hollow sense of justice. She was experiencing a fraction of the pain she had inflicted on me, and Brian's ashen, humiliated face told me he was feeling it too. My goal accomplished. I saw no reason to stay a minute longer in that room, thick with shock and gossip. I squared my shoulders and announced, "Again, I'm sorry to have interrupted the festivities. I'll take my leave now. Happy holidays." The last two words came out with a razor's edge of sarcasm that left the room silent. With that, I turned and walked to the door. Every eye followed me, I'm sure, but I didn't look back even once. As I stepped outside into the cold night air, I heard the eruption begin behind me. Raised voices, sobs, someone demanding that Brian leave at once. I shut the door on the chaos. The winter chill hit my face. I hadn't realized until that moment that I was smiling. It was not a joyous smile, but a grim, victorious one. The kind of smile a soldier wears after winning a hard-fought battle. I got into my truck, hands still trembling slightly with adrenaline, and drove off. Alone, free, and oddly at peace. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was as severe as I'd intended. Lauren moved out of our house immediately after the disastrous party, taking refuge with a cousin in another town. When our divorce was finalized a few months later, she walked away with almost nothing. Thanks to the evidence of her infidelity, she had no claim to alimony, and I kept the majority of our assets. She was left financially unstable and, perhaps worse for her, socially ruined. Word of her affair and its spectacular exposure spread quickly through our community. Former friends avoided her, whispers trailing everywhere she went. Ashamed and shunned, Lauren never returned to live in our neighborhood. We haven't spoken except through lawyers, and I have no desire to ever see her again. Brian fared no better. Melissa filed for divorce immediately, and by all accounts, she's poised to win full custody of their kids, along with a hefty share of their property. Brian's own reputation couldn't survive the public shaming. He was asked to resign from his managerial job once the affair became common knowledge at their workplace. The civil lawsuit I launched against him is ongoing, but his lawyer has already approached mine about a settlement. I suspect he'll pay whatever he can to avoid facing me in court, and to stop more details of his misdeeds from hitting the newspapers. Either way, he's financially and professionally wrecked. In the end, the two people who betrayed me ended up with nothing but each other, and even that didn't last. From what I hear, Brian and Lauren split apart soon after, each blaming the other for the catastrophe their lives became. And me? I have no regrets. I stood up for myself and made them face the consequences of their actions. In the quiet mornings now, I sip my coffee on the back porch of a house that is mine alone, feeling a sense of peace and hard-won vindication. I gave them a war they never saw coming, and I won.